that the Met Gala is the biggest night in fashion. The Met Gala happened last night. Definitely some wild moments to talk about. Today on the podcast, the highlights of the 2024 Met Gala. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so movies have the Oscars. The music has the Grammys. When it comes to fashion, the biggest night of the year is the Met Gala. Not because it's an award show. It is not. But it is the night where famous people really flex and designers get to show off their best work. The official dress code, the theme for this year's Met Gala was the Garden of Time. I regret to inform you that a lot of people just thought, that means florals, but many other people said, let's get really creative when it comes to these interpretations. There's a lot to talk about in terms of those interpretations. Danya Issawi is a fashion news writer at The Cut. She's in New York, where she was at the Met Gala after parties. Gianlucca Russo is a freelance fashion journalist. He's in Arizona. Gianlucca, Danya, welcome to the show. How's it going, everybody?
Hi.
It's going good.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Listen, Danya, I'm going to start with you because I'm assuming you're reeling, you're struggling because it is the day after the Met Gala after parties. Tell the people how the Met Gala after parties work.
Well, we talked about it. I'm rallying right now. I'm
You're
really
rallying.
rallying.
You're
I really
getting
ended
the
up only
energy up.
going to one.
Okay.
I went to Cardi B's after party, which is I love saying that out loud.
Great sentence, great flex. Love to see it.
Great sentence.
Yeah.
I had caviar on a potato chip in a dimly lit room, so I can't really complain.
No, you cannot. Absolutely, you cannot. Listen, I started the show off by describing the Met Gala as the biggest night in fashion. Can you put that in context for us, Danya? Why does it matter so much?
I think it's one of those rare events where you kind of pluck all of these people from this ether of the zeitgeist and put them all in one room. Baz Luhrmann once called it an aquarium, and I think that's accurate. Like, you have athletes, you have directors, you have movie stars, you have models, you have designers, you have all these people that are culturally significant in their own way, all together on the red carpet. So the eyeballs that you're drawing in is just like massive.
Right. Like, there's so much attention on this thing. Gianluca, what's your read on why the Met Gala matters so much?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say it also really shows you who's kind of leading this cultural moment around fashion right now and who's kind of following it. And I think a lot of times we see the celebrities who will follow. It's very clear that they're just there to have fun. And then you see the ones who are really there to either make a statement or to really make their name known or make their mark on fashion known. And so I think that's what's always exciting about it for me, is getting to see who's really going to lead the way into this next era of fashion.
Are there any names that stand out for you as you're like, just in terms of this idea of this person's going to lead the way into the next era of fashion? Just a real quick, this name was not on my radar yesterday. Now they're on my radar.
One not on my radar? I don't know. I feel like yesterday was almost
Gianluca's
very
like, everybody's on my
predictable.
radar. Get out of here. That's my job. I know everything about this world.
I feel like yesterday was a little predictable in terms of who showed up and who didn't. And so
Okay.
I can't say there was anyone that I was like newly shocked by.
Okay, I'm going to come back to this in just a moment. But Danny, maybe let's talk about the theme. So the theme, the Garden of Time, this is not just a word salad. It's a specific reference to a book. It's a novel. Let's talk about what that inspiration for that theme is and also how people interpreted that theme.
So the inspiration for the theme was a bit convoluted, because the exhibit itself was Sleeping Beauties, and then the dress code was Garden of Time. And that's based on a J.G. Ballard story about this wealthy count and countess who hide themselves away in their beautiful, extravagant villa as a mob approaches their castle, essentially. And the only way to keep the mob at bay is to pluck a crystal flower every day that turns back time. And eventually they run out of flowers and so on and so on. I thought the theme was really interesting, especially given the point of time that we're in, especially given, I was outside covering the protests at the Met Gala, and the juxtaposition and the irony of, a bunch of rich people inside the Met Gala in their outfits was definitely apparent. But everybody on the red carpet was like, florals. That's what we're going to go with today.
Because that feels
Everybody
like the
went
safest
with
sort
the
of
garden
interpretation.
theme.
I'm interested in this. I'm interested in this idea because you just laid out where the theme comes from and this idea of this novel of this very rich couple who are trying to sort of hide behind their wealth as much as they can as a crowd of protesters say, "Hey, like this mob is approaching their house," and they say you're living this isolated life. You've isolated yourself away with your wealth. That has always been the criticism of the Met Gala. So to see them
Mhm.
engage with it, at least thematically, is kind of interesting. But then to see that kind of come manifest when you see a crowd of protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters outside the Met, they're audible as you are watching the red carpet. You can hear the protesters kind of in the distance. What did you make of that juxtaposition? The idea that they were meant to be engaging with this theme, Danya, but then also it was kind of coming true in real life.
I think the irony was lost on a lot of people.
Hmm.
I'm curious if the people who set the theme had that thought as well. As you said, this is a criticism time and time again of the Met Gala.
Yeah.
And
That it's
I'm curious if
isolated, that it's like for rich people. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm curious if they even, took into account like, oh, this might be a little too on the nose here.
Gianluca, what's your read on this? The idea that the Met Gala, in choosing that theme, it's at least alluding to engaging with this long-standing criticism of the Met Gala. But then, you get to the actual night, and no one there is actually willing to engage with the reality, which is to say, you're celebrating all this wealth, all this opulence, and all of this extravagance, but you cannot hear the people who are approaching right now.
Yeah, I think it's very on par with how fashion has always operated. I think
Mm.
for one part, fashion, quite frankly, is often ignorant to kind of their place in society. And so I think that is a very clear picture of ignorance right there. To pick that theme and then not really acknowledge it at all throughout the evening, especially given what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
But that's very kind of on par with how fashion operates. And so fashion will often avoid, or fashion kind of decides to get involved in something, it does so in a very kind of way. I often see these back and forths. I would say I was surprised we didn't see as more kind of conversation happened last night around these topics. It was a little surprising to me because in the past few years, we've seen a lot more kind of cultural and political conversations happen on the
Hmm.
carpet of the Met Gala. And last night felt like there was a really big separation protest outside. So it felt like a very weird kind of moment.
Yeah, I have to say that like flipping back and forth between the people who are tweeting images of the protests and the size of that protest that was there, and then sort of watching as celebrities kind of go up and down the red carpet was just yeah, it was a big exercise in juxtaposition. I think you're right, Gianluca, to note that like that's in many ways that's fashion, right? Like that's a way fashion's kind of always operated. It alludes to or has sort of touches on the thing that is happening around it, but rarely in such direct conversation. If folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. The show is called Commotion, and right now we are talking about the Met Gala the morning after with Danya Issawi and Gianluca Russo. Okay, let's talk about the outfits. I mean, that's the thing that people have fun with as we watch the Met Gala. So pushing beyond the meanings to the actual looks. John Luke, I'm going to start with you. Who was the real belle of the ball, and why? Who are you picking?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I anticipated it would be, and it was. For me, it was Zendaya who really kind of brought it home. She was a co-chair
Ooh,
of the gala, and I
yeah.
feel like she always really pulls through. But yesterday, I feel like we saw two looks from her, which was definitely surprising and kind of solidified her spot there in fashion and at the gala. But I think what was interesting is we saw this much more mature version of her that we don't always see, and we got to see a kind of very playful side at the start in her first look, and then a much more kind of mature and grown one in her second
Can you
look. And so
describe the looks a little bit? What was she looking like?
yeah, so both looks were by John Galliano, and I think the first one, a lot of people I saw online compare it to Effie Trinket in The Hunger Games for kind of how outrageous it was, which I think is a great comparison.
Yeah.
But it was this kind of like blue and black striped gown that had a headpiece and kind of these florals embroidered throughout, and I think it really captured the attention, and the makeup was done very well. It was definitely a showstopper to start the carpet. And then she returned to the carpet later in the evening in this kind of very extravagant black gown with a super long train and then this really colorful headdress.
Yeah.
And I think the two of them really showed how Zendaya can capture such a range in what she wears and how she really understands fashion and her place in fashion. And so I think that for me was kind of the star moment of the night.
I'm gonna go to you, Daniel. What was the look that stood out for you?
Honestly, she wasn't even on theme, but Cardi B.
Now,
I
are you
love,
not? You're just saying that because you went to her party, man. I think that's.
yeah, I'm trying to get brownie points,
Okay,
especially
what
on
was
Bad
Cardi
News.
B? What did she have on?
She honestly wore a similar look to Zendaya's second look, and she wore this long black train and a massive black headdress. And I just love when people bring drama to the Met Gala. Like,
Hmm.
I always think of Rihanna's yellow guaupe couture dress that
Hmm.
stopped people in their tracks. And, you know, I just love that drama. Like,
Hmm.
we were talking about Chris Hemsworth earlier and how he was like wearing a cream suit.
He
Like,
wore a
okay,
cream suit. Like I was so before the show started, I was saying I was so disappointed in the Chris Hemsworth look because he just showed up in a cream suit and a white shirt, and I was like, man, you are one of the co-chairs of this thing. Can you at least go, have a color, anything that is happening? And there was nothing happening at all.
my counterpoint to that though was that he has a face like that. So like it made up for it a little bit. But you were right. Like
Yes.
it was boring.
Yeah.
Like this is the Met Gala. Like you can be fun and have fun and show up in something that borders, costume, but like still stays in the realm of fashion.
Yeah.
And I really love when people do that.
Well, so like this is often the criticism of men at the Met Gala, Gianluca. Like I feel like there's quite often like the dresses that women show up in are just so beautiful and extravagant and elaborate, and then you get quite a few men who are like, I got a suit, and it has a fun color on this side, and it honestly is a disappointment. One of my favorite looks from yesterday, though, having said that, was Bad Bunny. And I felt like Bad Bunny's look was kind of on theme. Bad Bunny showed up with this, what looked like an unfinished suit. Like, it looked like it had like tailoring marks still kind of like on the outside. And to me, like that was like on theme of the idea of like, yes, there is this opulence, there's this extravagance. This suit was very expensive, but it looks unfinished because we're running out of time. And he's at least in conversation, right, with the idea of the Garden of Time, the idea of like how much your wealth can protect you from like sort of outsider conversations. The moment of the night for me, Gianluca, was watching Tyla, the singer, get picked up and then put on the other side of the stairs because her dress was so form-fitting that she could not walk up the stairs. Incredible look, incredible dress, but also just like I always like look for those moments that like create some kind of social conversation, and so I was really excited by that. Were there any moments that as you were watching, you're like, this is going to cause a lot of social media conversation, and that's really worth paying attention to?
I think for me, what I saw online kind of erupt was Lana Del Rey's look had a lot of conversation around it. And so she wore this dress with this kind of like sheer overlay over the headpiece that essentially looked like branches coming out of her. And so it was this kind of very dark, kind of sinister take on Mother Nature that I liked.
Mm.
And I think those are the looks that got the most kind of conversation online and most attention about. And I think Emma Chamberlain attempted something similar with kind of a brown sheer dress as well,
Hmm.
with lace on it. And I think what I enjoyed about those is that it took this theme of, Mother Nature and this Garden of Time, but it made it darker and it almost made it a little bit more relevant to the story itself that this is based on, right? And so I think that's what I really enjoyed. And there was a lot of conversation around those, but I think Lana Del Rey's in particular got a lot of heat because I don't think it was necessarily the most beautiful dress there, but I think almost that was the point, is
Yeah.
that it wasn't supposed to show beauty, it was supposed to show kind of a meaning, and I think it did.
I think the real winner of the night might be Emma Chamberlain because she's a YouTuber, Emma Chamberlain, because she's being mentioned in the same breath as Lana Del Rey by Gianluca Russo. Like, that is what's happening here. Danya, I've got like 30 seconds left. Was there a look that really did not work for you and you're like, next year, just keep that at home. Please don't do that again?
I mean, maybe Chris Hemsworth. I feel like we're really dragging him through the mud today. But
Yes.
again, a cream suit and the carpet was cream. He just kind of blended in. It was
Yeah.
too much continuity.
It was well. I mean, again, this was my problem from the very beginning. Is like, if you're gonna become the very emblem of men showing up to the Met Gala and truly giving us nothing, then that's a disappointment, especially when you're the chair. But you know what? To your point, he has that face. He can get away with a lot. Danya, Gianluca, I got to leave it there. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Pleasure. Danya Issawi covers fashion for The Cut, and Gianluca Russo is a freelance fashion journalist and the author of The Power of Plus. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, so we are in this boom of reality shows about luxury real estate. You got Selling Sunset, or Selling the OC, or Luxe Listings Sydney. And now Toronto has Luxe Listings Toronto on Amazon Prime. Let's hear a bit of the trailer.
The Toronto luxury market has blown up.
This is huge.
14 feet, a waterfall, a jumping rock.
Custom theater,
Private wine cellar.
tennis court.
Luxury, baby. Luxury, luxury, luxury.
That's what I'm always saying. Luxury, luxury, luxury. Jackson Weaver is here to talk about Luxe Listings Toronto. Jackson, thanks for being here, pal.
Thank you for having me.
First, I want to note that we're kind of matching. I like this vibe. I like that we sort of showed up.
I did it on purpose. I knew. I wanted to echo a little bit.
You're like, on this day, we're going to wear relatively the same color. I love this for us. Okay, let's talk about these shows and the fantasy that these shows are selling. What are they selling? Why do they seem to be appealing to such a wide audience, do you think?
I mean, like, why did we like MTV Cribs or the litany of these shows we've had in the past? I mean,
Sure.
I don't know how many luxury shows. I don't know how far back they go, but I would imagine they go back as far as reality TV does.
Sure.
At all. I mean, it gives you the opportunity to both kind of emulate luxury and also mock the people who have it at the same time. I know so many people are hate watching these things. My sister loves these shows and she says she likes to hate watch them. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's also kind of it kind of like echoes the idea of narrative where we get all this tension and release where there's little problems. We have this very high octane music to get all your like suspense
This is
juices
a-
flowing.
this is
and
a
then
serious
everything gets
crisis.
revealed immediately. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
oh no, my brother put the sign listing on this listing's house and he shouldn't have, and they're like staring at each other, death grips, and then a minute later, no one cares anymore. So you just kind of like get to pretend like you're watching a real story without actually investing at all.
I do have to get on board with the hate watching. I feel like I don't, and I say this like I'm not a natural hater, Jackson. I'm not a natural born hater, but
Really? Okay.
But there's something about these shows where when I watch them, what I'm doing is like just judging the choices that people have made. You know, like they go, like, you have all this money and this is what you choose to spend it on. And I think like there's something connective about that. Like you can really like bond with other people over being like, I really disagree with this choice or I really agree with this choice. At least that's my read on those things. Are you a hate watcher? Does that come naturally to you or not so much?
Oh, I'm such a hate watcher. I don't hate watch this. I hate
Okay.
watch other things. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think what it does is it gives you a sense of agency because there is an inequality I think we're all aware of in life. And this gives you the illusion in a way of I'm getting mine because like these people are rich and yet they don't have my class. They don't have my style. They're not real people like I am. And the show is like all artifice.
Yeah.
So, and this is not like decrying people who do this because I think this is a way that you can function in a world that does very horrible things to a lot of people where
Sure.
you see people who have it all. And if you can't, actively go up to them and say, this is unfair what you have, you can watch a show and be like, oh, well, at least they have bad style. So I have one up on them there.
Yeah, it's not a comfort to me that they have bad style, but at least I can land that jab. Okay, well, let's introduce people to these characters. I'm going to ask you to introduce the main characters of Luxe Listings Toronto. There's a power couple, Peter and Paige Torkin, and then there's a young upstart from a competing firm named Brett Stark. Here's a scene between the three of them at the end of the first episode.
I heard a rumor.
You did.
I did.
What did you hear?
I heard that you guys are opening an office on Wellington right in our hood.
What are you, scared of that? Are you okay with that? Do I need your permission?
Is it true?
We love you. We can't stay away from you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
Come right
oh,
beside you.
That's what it is. I was so magnetic that you guys had to open an
Yes,
office.
yes.
And also, we're coming to take over all the luxury real estate in downtown. How
Oh,
do
you
like
are?
that? 100%.
If Peter and Paige think they can open an office downtown and business is just going to flow in, they have something else coming.
That's the music did most of the job, of
Right.
torquing the drama. Who are these people? Who are these three people that we just heard?
I mean, you get Peter and Paige. They have their own real estate agency. They immigrated from Iran 25 years ago, and all the copy says how they built themselves up into selling these extravagant homes. They're these huge players in the industry. Then you get Brett, who's kind of their foil, who also injects the overt Canadiana. I think he has one line about, he says A all the time. He has one line about like, oh, you can't chirp that view or something, which is like, oh my God, stop, please. But I think talking about the characterization is not the right way to look at the show because, like, yes, they have characters and they have real lives theoretically in Toronto, but the way
They're
that
real
this
people,
show
Jackson.
works,
Yes, continue.
they
Sorry.
are real. They are real people,
Yeah,
like Evan Peters is a real person. I don't know him at all. And like, it's the same thing here where this it rides this really fine line between documentary and fiction where like this is kind of real people's lives, but everything is artifice. Everything is orchestrated. And you can tell because they're not actors. And I don't know if you like hear the way they talk with each other, but it's very stilted. And you get these characters that like
I can almost hear a producer being like, this is how you torque the little sort of disagreements between them.
Okay, so they going back a few years ago, I'm from Vancouver. They filmed like the Real Housewives of Vancouver in Vancouver, obviously. My sister worked at, I think it was Milestones, and they came in one time and like none of the waitresses wanted to serve them. My sister like said she would do it. And they just had her go like back and forth like 40 times as they kept tweaking the different interactions and the different sort of like controversies they could build into that setting, which is kind of what this is. You have characters, but all of their conflicts are completely orchestrated, completely artifice. And I think you can hear my ick. Some people like it. I don't. But
Jackson, your ick is all over this conversation, buddy. Your ick is like the primary thing coming through. But actually, I want to talk about the way that they sometimes try to force some of these narratives in there. So, you know, I never knew, for example, that having 200 cranes over the sky of Toronto is a thing that makes Toronto such a livable city. Like, what do you make of the version of Toronto that Luxe Listings Toronto is presenting you?
I mean, that version exists. The Bridle Path is a place.
Bridle Path is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the country. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We have all of these places that absolutely are real. And I think the most, I don't know if this is, I think Toronto has like the most cranes of any North American city. I don't know if I'm lying about that. I think that's true.
Yeah.
But like that does exist, but to hyper focus on one aspect of the city and one type of life in the city and one kind of tax bracket in the city I don't think the show reaches for reality, but it is a little bit alienating to live in the real Toronto and watch that Toronto from outside of the window.
Sure. I can totally believe that. And like the idea of like, you know, this is a show that is like, here's all these extravagant closed off neighborhoods like the Bridle Path, like it's like such an idyllic place to be. And yet like in the news today, we're literally hearing of, you know, there was a shooting outside Drake's property, which is on the Bridle Path, which I think just like is a reminder that there's no amount of money that can protect you from the realities of just like being in a city. Like that is not a thing that you can eventually buy. Look, we got like maybe a couple minutes here. As a cast of Luxe Listings Toronto points out, Toronto is one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in, but they also say that like it's a good thing. Like they talk about it as though, hey, good for us. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. We're in the midst of a housing crisis in this country. How does this show strike you coming right now in conversation with the fact that so many people are talking about the housing crisis?
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I think Brett brags about how it's the most competitive real estate market in the world, I think, or North America. And that's a housing crisis. That's what
he says that as a brag.
The cool thing there. Yeah. And I mean, like literally right now I'm sitting in an apartment in which the residents are trying to organize a rent strike because of in this building, there are rent increases that are almost double digits year over year. And to live in that environment and watch this other world at the same time does feel weird. But I mean, there's Luxe Listings Sydney, I believe, which also very, very difficult real estate situation. And this reminds me of when I moved from Vancouver, when they brought the Olympics there. From outside, it was a great thing. But living in the city at the time with the homeless crisis that was and is ongoing there, that was not how the people inside of the city viewed it. There were a lot of protests, a lot of issues like that. So I think I haven't experienced this from other cities, but I do think that if you live in a place that is braggadocious about opulence, it can feel gross. But I would also say this is escapism for a lot of people, which is totally fine and totally fair.
Jackson, I got to leave it there. A hateful watcher, but also a thoughtful one. Thank you so much for your time, dude.
I don't want to be such a hater.
No. I appreciate that about you. Thank you for being here, dude. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Jackson Weaver, entertainment writer here at CBC. You can watch, if you must, Luxe Listings Toronto on Amazon Prime. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Hey, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'll see you then.